Today, we're diving deep, like really deep, to look at the incredible hidden architecture that's inside every single one of our cells. This is the biological engineering that literally stops us from being puddles on the floor. So let's get into it.
So think about it. Our cells are under constant stress and pressure, right? They're not just these quiet, passive little bags of goo. They're more like bustling cities. So what on earth is giving them their shape, their strength, and their structure?
Well, the answer is something called the cytoskeleton. Now, this isn't a static skeleton like ours. No, it's this incredibly dynamic and adaptable framework. And to really get our heads around it, we're going to break it down into three key parts, thinking of them as the cell's internal ropes, its supportive mesh, and its own personal highway system.
Okay, first up, the parts that are all about pure, brute strength. These are the intermediate filaments. You should absolutely think of these as the steel ropes inside the cell that give it real toughness and the ability to withstand being stretched and pulled.
So how do you build something so strong? Well, it's a brilliant bit of molecular engineering. It doesn't just start as one giant protein. No, it starts with a single little piece, a monomer. Two of those twist together. Then two of those pairs join up. But here's the clever part. They're staggered and face opposite directions for stability. They link up end to end, and finally, 8 of those completed strands get supercoiled together. It's just like how you'd make a real-world rope, and it's this layering that gives it incredible tensile strength.
And here's the thing. These ropes don't just float around on their own. They're all connected, forming this continuous network. In our skin cells, for example, you have keratin filaments that are linked from one cell to the next by these super strong rivets called desmosomes. And then they're anchored to the tissue underneath by hemidesmosomes. The whole thing creates a single, tough fabric that can spread out any stress, so no one spot takes the full force of a hit.
You can see how essential this system is for just holding us together. So that leads to a pretty important question. What happens if there's a weak link in the chain? What if the ropes themselves are just not made right?
Well, that can lead to a really devastating genetic disorder called epidermal lysis bullosa simplex, or EBS. In people with EBS, a mutation weakens those keratin filaments. The ropes just can't handle the stress. And what that means is, with even the slightest bit of friction, the cells themselves literally tear apart and rupture. This causes terrible, painful blistering of the skin. It is a direct and awful consequence of having faulty cellular ropes.
And this comparison here really drives home just how the whole system works. In EBS, the problem is that the ropes inside the cell break. But in a different but related condition, the ropes are perfectly fine. It's the anchors holding the cells down that fail. The result looks similar. You still get blistering, but the cause is completely different. Here, the entire cell just rips away from its foundation. It just goes to show that every single part of this network, the ropes and the anchors, is absolutely critical. All right, let's switch gears now from static ropes to something way more dynamic.
So next up, we've got probably the most versatile and dynamic part of the whole cytoskeleton, the actin filaments. If those intermediate filaments we just talked about were the static steel ropes, then actin is like this dynamic, adaptable mesh that's constantly being built up and broken down to change the cell's shape and let it move around. And believe me when I say versatile, I really mean it. Actin is like the cell's ultimate Swiss Army knife. It's the thing that pinches a cell in two when it divides. It's what allows cells to literally crawl and migrate around the body. It helps immune cells eat up bacteria. And it works hand in hand with another protein, myosin, to make our muscles contract. It is always busy. But one of its most basic, fundamental jobs is just maintaining the cell's shape. Right underneath the cell's outer membrane, there's this protein called spectrin that acts like millions of little tiny clips. It links all the actin filaments together into this supportive mesh, which we call the cortical mesh. And it's this mesh that gives the cell its structural integrity and helps it hold that specific three-dimensional form.
I think you can probably see where this is going. This system is just so elegant and vital, especially for cells that need a very specific shape to do their job. So, what happens if the clips holding this whole mesh together are faulty?
Well, that leads to a condition called hereditary spherocytosis. In this case, that spectrin protein, the clip, is defective. So the actin mesh under the membrane of our red blood cells becomes weak. They lose that distinct concave disc shape that they're supposed to have, and they just collapse into these fragile little spheres. And these misshapen cells, well, they can't carry oxygen properly, and they get destroyed easily, which leads to anemia. It's a huge system-wide problem, all because of one faulty microscopic part.
Okay, for our final component, let's look at the cell's logistics network.
You know, if a cell is a city, then microtubules are its highways, its railways, its entire transit grid. They're responsible for moving all the vital cargo from one place to another.
So unlike the other filaments we've seen, these are actually rigid, hollow tubes. They're built from a repeating protein subunit called beta-tubulin, which assembles into these really long, straight tracks that can span the entire length of the cell.
What's cool is that these highways all radiate out from a central hub. You can think of it like a central train station, called the Microtubule Organizing Center, or MTOC for short. From there, little motor proteins act like cargo trucks. They literally latch onto packages and walk them along these microtubule tracks to get them to their final destination. It's the cell's very own internal logistics network, making sure everything gets exactly where it needs to go.
But, beyond all that day-to-day transport, these microtubules have one job that is just more dramatic and fundamentally important than any other, and that is orchestrating the precise, delicate dance of cell division, also known as mitosis.
When a cell gets ready to divide, it's incredible. The entire highway system is torn down and then completely rebuilt for this one singular purpose. The MTOC, that central hub, duplicates itself. New microtubule spindles grow out from each one. They reach out, they attach to the chromosomes, and with unbelievable precision, they align them perfectly right in the middle of the cell before pulling the identical copies apart into two brand new daughter cells. It is literally the physical machinery that makes life possible.
So let's just pull back for a second and look at the big picture. We've seen three totally distinct systems: the ropes, the mesh, and the highways. And they all have to work together perfectly to create this dynamic, living, internal framework.
And really, it all boils down to this. You've got the ropes, our intermediate filaments, which give us tensile strength. When they fail, you get terrible skin blistering. You've got the mesh, the actin filaments, which control shape and movement. If they fail, you can get anemia. And then you've got the highways, the microtubules, which manage transport and division, where any errors can be absolutely catastrophic for the cell.
So the most important thing to take away from all this is that it's not just some abstract textbook biology. The integrity of these ropes, the adaptability of this mesh, and the precision of these highways are quite literally the foundation of our health. What happens on this microscopic scale directly defines our well-being on the big macroscopic scale.
It's just amazing, right? There is so much elegant complexity packed into every single one of our cells. It really makes you wonder, if this intricate architecture is running the whole show just beneath the surface, what other incredible secrets are our cells hiding in plain sight?